The screen fades from black and Booker is found staring at his desk. Music can be heard coming from Anna's room. With puzzlement in his voice, Booker gets up and opens the door to Anna's room. A crib is seen for just a second, and then the screen cuts to black. BioShock Infinite has officially ended with Booker's last words being, "Anna, is that you?"
BioShock Infinite could have ended with Booker's drowning, but this one vague post-credit scene has created so much speculation. I, of course, tried to find an explanation for the scene, and I can definitely tell you that I definitely have found something. However, that something seems to go farther than I ever thought it would go. Before I continue, I should advise you not to continue watching if you haven't seen Part 1. Part 1 will be used as a foundation for everything I'm about to talk about, so if you haven't seen it, please click this link. That'll take you to Part 1. I'll give you 5 seconds. For those of you who have already watched Part 1, keep in mind that this whole video only regards my thoughts. Everything should be considered as speculation and nothing should be considered as canon. In addition, I will be trying to take what I believe to be Rational Games' intentions into account. After all, the only way to understand a work of art is by understanding how the artist sees it. I'm telling you this because what I've come up with may seem irrational to some people. All I ask is that you keep an open mind for what you're about to see. Without further ado, let's continue the analysis.
Constants and variables are two words that mean a great deal within BioShock Infinite. In Part 1, I explained what constants and variables are and how they form many different realities, but I did not explain what the constants and variables throughout the game were. For example, Booker giving Anna to Robert Lutece is a constant. Booker always gave away Anna to wipe away his debt. To prove this, let's return back to the scene where Elizabeth makes Booker relive that moment. Booker walks into Anna's room and starts to become extremely confused about her existence. Not only does he not remember having a baby, but he claims that he would never give that baby to Robert. However, Elizabeth knows otherwise. She states that Booker can't leave the room until he does. You can wait as long as you want, eventually you'll give him what he wants. In a way, this line breaks the fourth wall. No matter how long the player waits, the game will not allow the story to continue until the player makes Booker give Robert the baby. To me, this scene is absolutely brilliant. Rational Games use a basic gameplay mechanic to strongly reinforce a crucial concept of the story. They did a very similar thing on a massive scale before. That thing was known as the original BioShock. In the case of BioShock Infinite, no matter how much this scene differs from each playthrough, it always ends with Booker giving Robert what he wants. Therefore, this scene is heavily implied to be a constant. Since I gave you an example of a constant within BioShock Infinite, I think that it's only fair to give you an example of a variable. Appropriately, the variable I'm about to give you answers why the post-credits scene exists. This variable I'm referring to is Booker's decision to take the baptism. Booker's decision to be baptized itself creates two realities. There's a reality where he goes to the baptism and a reality where he doesn't go at all. The reality where he goes to the baptism has obviously been the main focus of BioShock Infinite. After all, the baptism decides whether Comstock exists or not. What isn't given is the reality where Booker doesn't even go to the baptism. The funny thing is that reality really is given. The post-credits scene is one of the many realities where Booker didn't go to the baptism. The reason these realities still exist is because Elizabeth only killed the Booker that decided to go to the baptism. Therefore, any Booker that didn't go to the baptism is still alive. However, I admit that I haven't completely explained everything regarding the post-credits scene. For example, if the final Booker we're being shown is a completely different Booker that has no relation to the events of BioShock Infinite, then why does he have puzzlement in his voice? Why does Anna's existence seem questionable to him? Is Anna even in the crib at the end? Though the answers may not be obvious, a couple people definitely have them. Rosalind Lutece was using a machine that allowed her to experiment with a very specific atom. What she didn't realize was that another version of her was doing the exact same thing at the exact same time in another reality. The result was a tear that allowed people in one reality to view and interact with other realities. This discovery allowed people to use the machine to their own advantage. Albert Fink was able to plagiarize music, Jeremiah Fink was allowed to create vigors from Rapture's plasmids, and Comstock was allowed to take Booker's child to play the role of an heir. However, the greatest thing that the machine allowed to happen was bring Robert Lutece into Rosalind's world. If you haven't figured it out yet, Robert Lutece is Rosalind Lutece. They are the same person from different realities. The Lutece twins were also two of the few people that knew the truth about Elizabeth. Since Comstock didn't want the secret to get out, he decided that the murder of 3 of those people was necessary. Lady Comstock was killed by Comstock and Daisy Fitzroy took the blame, and Jeremiah Fink was ordered to take out the Luteces. However, he didn't completely succeed in what he set out to do. This was because he tried to kill them by sabotaging their machine. Their death actually scattered them throughout time and space. Obviously, the Luteces were not happy with Comstock ordering Jeremiah Fink to murder them, so they decided that Comstock needed to be stopped. Giving Booker DeWitt a chance at redemption was what they figured would be the best way to accomplish that. They labeled this chance at redemption as an experiment, and that was where BioShock Infinite began. Where BioShock Infinite ended obviously shows that the Lutece's plan was successful. Booker DeWitt was able to finally stop Comstock and rescued Elizabeth in the process. What the Lutece's didn't expect was how Elizabeth would handle the discovery of her powers. They didn't know that Elizabeth would decide to stop Comstock from ever existing in the first place. After all, they were clueless to the extent of Elizabeth's powers as Booker was. They weren't completely happy about their experiment literally disappearing out of existence. Something needed to be done to show that everything that happened mattered. They figured that the best way to do that would be by allowing an existing Booker access to the memories of a Booker that succeeded in rescuing Elizabeth. This could have been accomplished by merging any existing Booker with a Booker that contained memories of succeeding. Yes, the merging of the same person from two realities is possible. The concept is similar to the theory behind nosebleeds. Whenever Booker had a nosebleed, he remembered something that another Booker did or his past self did, because his memories started to collide with each other. The merger of two Bookers is similar, but instead of one Booker remembering another Booker's memories, they were placed there by an outside force. This happens quite a bit to other people throughout the game. The first time it was seen happening was with the first two guards found after Elizabeth transported Booker into their first alternate reality. The guards were alive in the reality they were born in, but they remember being killed by Booker in the original reality. People cannot possibly be aware of their other selves in other realities unless they personally move into their other self's reality, their other self personally moves into their reality, or if they are merged with another version of themselves. Since they never crossed over into another reality, they could only have been merged. In this case, it was done by Elizabeth. Other examples include Chenlin remembering what he shouldn't have remembered, and Lady Comstock's ghost. Comstock picked a reality where Lady Comstock was still alive and apparently a horrible person, and merged her with Lady Comstock that he killed in his universe. This resulted in a ghostly rendition of Lady Comstock that no one enjoyed fighting. To consider this experiment a success, the Luteces did the same thing with Booker. Though the Booker that the player had been associated with is dead along with all the other Bookers and Comstocks that went to the baptism, at least one other Booker DeWitt in another reality continues to live with the memories of a successful Booker. That Booker is the one shown in the post-credits scene. However, there are still a few loose ends to tie up. If you already forgot, the Luteces weren't the only people with the ability to manipulate realities. There must be a reason I think the Luteces merged Bookers instead of Elizabeth. That reason exists, but the only way to find it is by going back to where it started. Are you sure this is what you want? This is the question Elizabeth asks Booker before he steps through the final doorway. He steps through and finds himself at what seems to be the baptism that he refused 20 years ago. When he turns around, he's startled by the sight of many Elizabeths. Booker then asks a very important question. Who are you? I ignored this question initially because he notices something that many people miss. The Elizabeth immediately in front of Booker is not the Elizabeth he's known. This is evident by Elizabeth's brooch that Booker picked out at Battleship Bay. In this scene, the brooch is absent. The scene the player is being shown is a stylistic representation of what is actually happening. What is actually happening is much grimmer. As soon as Booker went through the final door, Elizabeth went back in time to when Booker was about to be baptized. She then had to go through the hard act of murdering Booker. Some people may have found the ending for BioShock Infinite unsatisfying, but I can guarantee you that nobody would have been happy if BioShock Infinite ended like that. Nobody would have wanted to see Elizabeth murdering a Booker that didn't even know of her existence. Irrational Games knew this, so they made the concept a little more accessible. What's being shown in the last baptism scene is a stylistic representation of all the post-baptism Booker and Comstock timelines ceasing to exist. In other words, this scene is a merger and cancellation of millions of realities at the same time. That's why there are so many Elizabeths in this scene. Each Elizabeth represents an Elizabeth from another reality that the Booker that the player controlled has never seen until now. They then do what Elizabeth has already done. They murder Booker. Obviously, this scene is a better way to present how the timelines end to the player. However, all the questions have not been answered. Whether Elizabeth continues to exist or ceases to exist has been speculated about ever since BioShock Infinite came out. I can definitely understand the speculation since the last Elizabeth in the last baptism scene was never seen disappearing. Elizabeth was simply seen standing over Booker before the screen cut to black. Not to mention that Elizabeth is one of the best characters I've ever had the opportunity to interact with, and her demise is not a happy thought at all. I, of course, have my own belief about her existence. However, I doubt that you'd be happy with my belief. Elizabeth no longer exists. As much as I would love for her to tear into my reality, it'll never happen. Her being a fictional character probably doesn't help, but it's mainly because she doesn't exist anymore. How the screen cuts to black was basically the first thing that gave people hope about Elizabeth's existence, so I think that it's best to start there. Since everything that happened in BioShock Infinite takes place from Booker's baptism and on, Elizabeth killing Booker before he was baptized literally deletes BioShock Infinite's story. The screen cutting to black represents everything that the player had experienced being wiped out of existence. The cut to black doesn't happen because it's the end of BioShock Infinite. It cuts to black because BioShock Infinite never existed in the first place. The reason that the player doesn't see the last Elizabeth disappear is because she's also tied directly to BioShock Infinite's existence. After all, if there is no Comstock timeline, there is no Elizabeth. In other words, both the cut to black and Elizabeth's disappearance represent everything that happened in BioShock Infinite being erased from existence. Therefore, the screen must cut to black and Elizabeth must disappear at the same time. It's either that or the cut to black is a stylistic choice that was chosen to make the player question what they saw. If that's the case, then it obviously worked. However, I know some people question the relation between BioShock Infinite's story ceasing to exist and Elizabeth ceasing to exist. What could possibly connect the two existences together? Last time I checked, Elizabeth had the ability to manipulate realities. Why would her existence be restricted to the fate of the reality she was affected by? Believe it or not, the last baptism scene also answers those questions. In the last baptism scene, there was an Elizabeth in a white dress that grabbed Booker's right arm. When she grabbed Booker's arm in preparation to drown him, there was something about her that was very different. In fact, the pinky finger on her right hand was still intact. She exposes another variable in BioShock Infinite that many people don't realize to be a variable. The scene where Booker tries to stop Comstock from taking Anna doesn't always end the same way. Whether it's because Booker didn't make it in time to catch Comstock, or because the event didn't happen at all, there are some realities where Elizabeth never got her pinky finger severed. In those realities, she never had any powers in the first place. The Elizabeth in the white represents one of those Elizabeths. The reason this discovery is important, besides being mind-blowing, is because it also shows that Elizabeth isn't inhuman. The Elizabeth in white disappears in the same exact way that the Elizabeths with missing pinky fingers disappear. If Elizabeth's powers truly defined her fate, then there should have been some noticeable difference between how the Elizabeth in white and the Elizabeths with missing pinky fingers disappeared. Elizabeth is simply a human being with or without the powers to manipulate realities. The only conclusion that can be reached is that Elizabeth disappeared along with the story of BioShock Infinite. But if Elizabeth's fate has been decided, then does that mean the Lutesses disappeared with the story of BioShock Infinite too? The conclusion I've reached answers that question with a simple no. Without proof to support the theory, deductive reasoning already shows that the Lutesses must survive. Since Elizabeth has been erased from existence, the only individuals left that could possibly merge the final Booker with another Booker would be the Lutesses. Not only that, but I do have proof to support the theory. The Lutesses' powers and Elizabeth's powers are not the same. Elizabeth had the ability to manipulate realities, but the Lutesses are literally a part of all realities. No matter how hard Elizabeth tried, she would never have been as powerful as the Lutesses. In addition, the Lutesses technically did die. The tear found in Columbia's finest photography shop exposes that the Lutesses left behind bodies. The tear showed that the Lutesses paid Rupert Cunningham a visit to tell him that he took horrible funeral photos. Not only that, but after Booker finished fighting Lady Comstock's ghost for the first time in Memorial Gardens, the Lutesses were found literally digging their own graves. Therefore, the information gathered points to Elizabeth's demise and the Lutesses' continued existence. Maybe they'll be the ones to open a tear into my reality. Perhaps they'll pop by to tell me how right and wrong I am about everything. Regardless of that, there is still another question left to answer. Is Anna truly in that crib at the end? Though I promised an answer to this question, my answer might not be the answer you desire. My answer is that she is in the crib and not in the crib at the same time. There are many different Bookers that live in realities where they didn't go to the baptism, and its existence depends on what those Bookers accomplished in their lives. Some Bookers might have had Anna, some Bookers might have had a baby boy, some Bookers might have not had a wife at all, some Bookers might have gone to Rapture, etc. For all I know, Booker could have given birth to Andrew Ryan, which would explain why Booker could operate the bathysphere in Rapture. In other words, Anna's existence isn't definite. It is honestly up to the player to decide the fate of Anna DeWitt. I personally like to believe that Anna's in the crib. Not only that, but I'm going to assume that Booker's wife never died. I'm also going to assume that they went to Paris as a family and watched Revenge of the Jedi. Even though BioShock Infinite itself ended with one of the most depressing endings ever, considering that everyone died by not existing in the first place, it also has one of the happiest endings of all time. I'm not saying it's happy because of what I believe in, but it's happy because I'm allowed to believe in it. In conclusion, Booker's decision to be baptized is one of the greatest variables BioShock Infinite has to offer.
Those are my thoughts. Some might have been strange and some might have been mind-blowing, but they're my thoughts nonetheless. Not only that, but you have the full right to share what you think about the ending. The beauty of the ending of BioShock Infinite is that it allows people to believe what they want to believe. In addition, what anyone believes matters. I'm not telling you to make a 30-minute video regarding the ending of BioShock Infinite, but feel free to look beyond what you've already looked at. Think about what you saw here, and think about what you saw in the game, and develop your own theories as to what happened. I can only wish that Anna's visit to Paris is a constant and not a variable.